My name is Nathaniel Reed, and the earliest memory I carry is of the wind sweeping across the endless barley fields of my hometown in Vermont. The air was always tinged with the scent of damp earth and the faint sweetness of ripened grain. It was a quiet place, almost forgotten by the rest of the world, but to me, it was the whole universe. Our modest wooden cabin sat at the edge of those vast fields, where my parents worked as tenant farmers for a wealthy landowner whose face I never once saw. He was a man of wealth and influence, but to us he was only a name, a distant shadow who owned the land beneath our feet. My parents, Samuel and Clara Reed, labored dawn to dusk to pay the rent and keep us fed. My father's hands were maps of suffering, leathery, cracked, and marked with scars from years of gripping plows and carrying sacks heavier than his frame should have endured. Yet he carried himself with a kind of dignity that poverty could never strip from him. His eyes, though tired, always shone with resolve. My mother, on the other hand, had a gentleness that softened the edges of our hardships. Her smile, even after long days under the punishing sun, could light the dimmest corner of our home. Her voice was my lullaby. When she sang at night, I believed, for a moment, that the world was kinder than it seemed. Evenings were sacred in our little home. After long hours of toil, we would gather around our rough wooden table. My mother would ladle out potato soup, thin but warm, and set out crusty bread that filled our cabin with the smell of comfort. My father would tell stories from his youth, of racing storms across the open fields, or sneaking into the woods to hunt rabbits when hunger grew too sharp. His voice was deep, steady, and his eyes would sparkle as though those memories were treasures he was gifting to me. I listened with my whole being, drawn into his tales as though I had lived them myself. When his voice quieted, my mother would hum soft songs, her melodies floating through the air like gentle breezes. Those nights felt like riches no gold could buy. My childhood was woven with both joy and quiet lessons about reality. I remember running barefoot through the fields, chasing butterflies that shimmered in the sunlight, or tumbling with cousins in games that left us caked in dust and laughter. But I also remember the sharp sting of winter when our patched clothes failed to keep out the cold. My shoes were hand-me-downs worn to the sole, and often I felt the hard ground beneath my feet. Yet, despite all this, I never felt deprived. My parents filled my life with love and reminded me daily that true worth was measured not by coins, but by the kind of person you became. My father once rested his rough hand on my shoulder and said, "Live uprightly, Nathaniel, and let goodness be your compass. The world may strip you bare, but if you keep your soul whole, you are never poor." Those words stayed etched in me. At 18, I began working full-time alongside my parents on the estate. The labor was merciless, plowing under the punishing sun, hauling fertilizers until my back ached, harvesting until my fingers blistered. Each day, I saw my father's back bend further and heard my mother's cough grow harsher. The shadow of poverty loomed over us, swallowing every coin before we could taste the sweetness of relief. After rent and food, nothing remained. I watched them grow old too quickly, and my heart ached with a resolve that hardened into a vow. I would find a way out, for them and for myself. At 21, I made the hardest choice of my life. It was an autumn morning, the dirt roads of our town carpeted with golden leaves. My mother's arms wrapped around me tight, her tears soaking my shirt as she whispered, "Be careful, Nathaniel. And don't forget us." My father said little, but his firm handshake conveyed everything: his pride, his fear, his unspoken hope. With an old backpack slung over my shoulders, I left home with only a few clothes, a bit of bread, and a heart filled with stubborn dreams. The city of New York swallowed me whole. Its noise was deafening, its pace relentless, its people rushing past like waves in a storm. I was a country boy adrift in an ocean I did not know how to swim. Yet I was alive with possibility, every towering building and bustling street a reminder that the world was bigger than the barley fields of Vermont. I found work as a waiter at Harrington House, a high-end restaurant in Manhattan. To me, it was a palace of polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and patrons who dined on meals worth more than my family spent in a month. I felt clumsy, out of place in my worn shoes and thick rural accent. I bowed my head, careful not to spill wine or stumble with trays. The job demanded perfection, smiles even in the face of insults, patience under endless criticism, and memory sharp enough to recall intricate menus. It was humbling, exhausting work, but I reminded myself of my parents. Every tip I earned, no matter how small, I saved for them. Then came the night she walked in. Amelia Harrington. She wore a cream fur coat that brushed against her knees, her golden hair catching the chandelier's light like spun silk. She was 25, the daughter of one of New York's wealthiest families, her world an entirely different galaxy from mine. And yet, when she spoke to me, it wasn't with the disdain of the other patrons. She asked questions with curiosity, her voice soft, her smile genuine. "You're not from here, are you?" she asked one evening as I cleared her table. "No," I admitted, almost embarrassed. "I'm from Vermont. A small town you probably haven't heard of." To my surprise, she leaned closer, her eyes sparkling. "Tell me about it." So I did. I told her about the barley fields, barefoot races with cousins, my mother's songs, my father's stories. To my disbelief, she listened as if I were spinning tales of wonder. And so began something I never expected. She returned to the restaurant, and our conversations grew longer, warmer, threaded with laughter. Eventually, I gathered the courage to invite her for coffee after a shift. She said yes. That night, as we sat in a modest cafe, I realized my heart was no longer my own. Months turned into a year, and I proposed with a simple silver ring I'd saved for. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered yes. I felt as though the world had finally blessed me. But reality is rarely so kind. Her family despised me from the moment they knew my name. Margaret, her mother, regarded me with icy contempt, sneering, "A waiter. That's all." Her brother Julian laughed openly, mocking me as a country fool. Her sister Eliza never missed a chance to call me a bumpkin. Amelia defended me fiercely, but I saw the cracks forming, the strain of being torn between love and family. We married in a small church, on the outskirts of the city. My parents stood proudly, though their clothes were plain and their smiles shy in the presence of Amelia's wealthy relatives. That day should have been perfect, yet her family's whispers and cold stares shadowed every moment. Still, Amelia's hand in mine gave me courage. She whispered, "Our love is enough, Nathaniel." And I wanted to believe her. She returned to the restaurant, and our conversations grew longer, warmer, threaded with laughter. Eventually, I gathered the courage to invite her for coffee after the early years of our marriage were blissful. We lived in a small apartment with sunlight streaming through the windows, where Amelia grew plants and filled the rooms with laughter. Evenings were our favorite, sharing blankets on the sofa, whispering about dreams of travel and children. She would tease, "Who should they look like?" and I would answer, "You, because the world deserves more of your smile." Those were the days I thought love could conquer all, but time has a way of testing love. We longed for children, yet year after year, the hope faded. Doctors, treatments, prayers, all in vain. Amelia grew quieter, shadows settling in her eyes. I tried to comfort her, but she drifted from me. At family gatherings, Margaret's insults sharpened, Julian's mockery deepened, and Eliza's laughter cut like knives. Worse still, Amelia stopped defending me. She sat in silence as their disdain washed over me. That silence hurt more than their cruelty. By our 5th year, she was a stranger in our home. Laughter vanished. Conversations became curt. She began going out late, dressing for events I was never invited to. New perfumes lingered on her skin, new clothes I had never seen her wear for me. I noticed the secretive smiles at her phone, the unexplained absences, the receipts from places I had never set foot in. Doubts gnawed at me, but I forced them aside. I clung to hope, desperate to keep the woman I loved. One evening, I prepared a dinner of steak and potatoes, her favorite, and filled the room with tulips. I tried to bridge the distance. Amelia, I said gently, you've seemed far away lately. Is everything all right? Her reaction was volcanic. She slammed her glass down, wine splattering across the table. So now you're accusing me? You think you, a waiter, are worthy to question me? Her words tore through me like claws. She stormed out, leaving me staring at the shattered glass and spilled wine that looked too much like blood. From then on, our home was no longer a refuge, but a battlefield of silence. She banished me to the sofa, claiming she needed space. Nights stretched into weeks, each one colder than the last. Then came the night of my 31st birthday. She sent a message saying she wanted to celebrate at Harrington House. My heart leapt, perhaps this was her way of reconciliation. I arrived with fragile hope, but what awaited me was a cruelty I could not have imagined. At a lavishly set table sat Amelia, her mother Margaret, her siblings, and a man I had never seen before. She smiled at him the way she used to smile at me. Their hands intertwined as though I were invisible. Margaret's lips curled with satisfaction as she slid a folder across the table. Inside W. When Amelia slid those divorce papers across the table and her family laughed in my face, I felt the ground beneath me split apart. Every whisper from the surrounding tables, every mocking glance, pierced me like arrows. 4 years, I had endured their contempt in silence, clinging to the belief that my love for Amelia was strong enough to withstand it. But as I sat there, staring at her entwined hand with Adrian's, I realized that what I had been holding onto was not love anymore, but the ghost of it. I wanted to disappear into the floor. To vanish before the laughter, before Eliza's phone captured every second of my humiliation, before Margaret's cold eyes devoured my pain. My throat ached with words I couldn't say, my hands trembled as though the world had become too heavy for them, and then, in the midst of that unbearable moment, a voice rose above the noise. Enough. The room hushed. I turned to see Henry Lawson, the owner of Harrington House, striding toward our table. He was a tall man in his 60s, his presence commanding without effort. His silver hair gleamed under the chandeliers, and his sharp eyes scanned the room until silence fell completely. Henry had always treated me with respect, more like a son than an employee, though I never understood why. He placed a hand firmly on my shoulder. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice calm yet powerful, I won't allow this establishment to be turned into a stage for cruelty. His gaze swept over Amelia and her family, lingering long enough to freeze their smug expressions. Then he turned to the crowd. Tonight, I have the honor of making an announcement. This man, Nathaniel Reed, has given years of loyalty, integrity, and excellence to Harrington House. And starting today, I am proud to promote him to restaurant manager. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. My humiliation blurred into disbelief. Around the room, gasps echoed, followed by applause, first from the staff, then from the diners. The same crowd that had moments ago pitied me now stood to celebrate me. Amelia's smile faltered. Adrian shifted uncomfortably. Margaret's face drained of color. And Eliza, suddenly realizing the tide of public opinion, lowered her phone and fumbled to stop the recording. Henry tightened his grip on my shoulder and whispered so only I could hear. "Hold your head high, son. They don't define you. You do." For the first time in years, I felt something stir inside me, pride not borrowed from another's approval, but born from within. I looked at the papers on the table. With a steady hand, I signed them. There was no trembling, no begging. I slid them back toward Amelia. "If this is what you want, then so be it." Her eyes widened, as though she had expected tears or desperate pleas. Instead, she faced a man who no longer feared losing her, because I had already found myself. The applause rose again, not for the promotion alone, but for the quiet dignity of reclaiming my worth. Margaret, flustered and red-faced, muttered something about leaving. Adrian, realizing the spectacle had turned against him, pushed his chair back and stormed out. Amelia lingered a moment longer, her lips parting as though she wanted to speak, but no words came. She followed them, her heels clicking against the marble like hollow echoes, and just like that, the chapter of my life with Amelia ended, not with closure, but with liberation. The weeks that followed were surreal. The video Eliza had attempted to record leaked online despite her efforts to bury it. Instead of showcasing my humiliation, it revealed the cruelty of Amelia's family and the resilience Henry had highlighted in me. Social media erupted with outrage at their treatment of me. Monsters, people called them. Heartless. Their carefully constructed image of refinement and superiority crumbled overnight. Margaret's social circle turned cold. The women who once gathered in her parlor now avoided her entirely, their invitations to parties and galas rescinded. Julian's business partners began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with his family's scandal. Eliza's career in media faltered, her superiors questioning her judgment and professionalism. And Amelia, her new relationship with Adrian disintegrated within weeks. He wanted the glow of her reputation, not the shadow of her disgrace. Abandoned and shunned, she retreated into obscurity. I didn't celebrate their downfall. Strangely, I felt nothing toward them anymore, not hatred, not pity. They had written their own fate with arrogance and cruelty. Life had simply handed them the bill. For me, life became something entirely new. As manager of Harrington House, I discovered a sense of purpose that went beyond survival. I no longer balanced trays and forced smiles. I orchestrated the entire dance of the restaurant, ensuring harmony between staff, chefs, and patrons. I arrived early each morning, walking through the dining hall as sunlight spilled across polished floors, and I felt a quiet joy in knowing this place thrived under my care. My colleagues respected me, not because of my title, but because they had seen me rise from the lowest rung with humility and persistence. Henry often teased me about being his successor. "One day, I'll hand you the keys, Nathaniel," he'd say with a wink. I never laughed off his words, but I never clung to them either. I was content in the present, savoring the life I had built with my own two hands. Meanwhile, I never forgot my parents. With my new salary, I sent them enough to retire comfortably. I had their old house renovated, the roof repaired, fresh paint on the walls, a garden for my mother to tend. When I visited, my father stood straighter than he had in years, his eyes brimming with pride. "We worried we had burdened you," he confessed one evening, his hand on mine. "But you've turned our struggle into strength." Their pride meant more to me than any applause or promotion ever could. It was during this chapter of my life that Claire Lawson entered the picture, Henry's daughter. Claire had worked part-time at Harrington House for years, managing administrative tasks and accounts, but I had never truly seen her until after my promotion. One afternoon, she walked into my office carrying a stack of invoices, her dark hair tied back, her smile as effortless as sunlight through a window. "You need help organizing these," she said, dropping the papers on my desk before I could protest. At first, our conversations were professional, limited to budgets and schedules. But slowly, they grew into something more. She asked about Vermont, about the fields I had once called home. Unlike others who had listened out of curiosity or condescension, Claire listened with genuine warmth. "That sounds like a childhood worth dreaming of," she said once, her eyes soft. And for the first time since Amelia, I spoke about my past without shame. We began sharing coffee breaks, then dinners after late shifts. She had a laugh that melted the weight of the day, and a way of looking at me as though she saw the whole of me, not the waiter, not the manager, but the man beneath it all. One evening, as we checked inventory together in the storeroom, she paused, holding a bottle of wine in her hands. "Do you know what I admire most about you, Nathaniel?" I shook my head, caught off guard. "You make people feel at ease," she said softly. "Even when you're hurting, you carry yourself in a way that gives others strength. That's rare." Her words struck something deep within me. I realized then that what we were building was not a replacement for the love I had lost, but something entirely different, gentle, steady, and real. A year passed, and my life transformed in ways I could never have predicted. I was no longer the humiliated husband begging for scraps of affection. I was Nathaniel Reed, a respected manager, a devoted son, a man learning to love again without fear. Claire and I grew inseparable, our bond deepening with every shared meal, every late-night conversation, every quiet walk through the city streets. We spoke of dreams, not castles in the air, but plans grounded in reality. She dreamed of opening a small cafe, warm and welcoming, where the smell of fresh bread and coffee would greet every visitor. I dreamed of someday returning to Vermont, not as a farmhand, but as a man who could show his children the beauty of those fields without the weight of poverty attached to them. One autumn evening, we sat on a park bench with cups of cocoa in our hands. The leaves, golden and red, swirled around us in the crisp breeze. Claire squeezed my hand gently and said, "You're stronger than you think, Nathaniel." For the first time, I believed it. As for Amelia and her family, they became ghosts in my story. Their downfall was not mine to orchestrate, nor my joy to relish. I heard whispers now and then, of Margaret's loneliness, Julian's failed ventures, Eliza's vanished career, Amelia's quiet regret. But they no longer mattered. My life was no longer defined by their scorn. Looking back, I realized the humiliation they intended for me was the very spark that lit the path to my renewal. Without their cruelty, I might have remained a man clinging to shadows. Instead, I found my light. Now, when I stand at the front of Harrington House, greeting guests with confidence, or when I sit by the window of my modest apartment with Claire beside me, I feel a peace I never thought possible. Life had stripped me bare, but in doing so, it revealed the strength I carried all along. The moral of my story is simple: never underestimate someone for their humble beginnings. Wealth may glitter, but true worth lies in character, kindness, and resilience. Arrogance that crushes others eventually destroys itself, while patience and perseverance carve a path to light. I began as the son of tenant farmers in Vermont, with nothing but callow.